Hi again. Here we are to talk about Swift and CALayer. Okay, and CALayer is it's a class that draws things on the screen. Every view that you create has a layer property, and that layer property is actually where all the things that you see in the view that are drawn into the view are drawn. So actually, the view doesn't draw anything; it just draws stuff on the layer. Layers can be layered. Okay, so a layer can have a child layer, right? So they have a hierarchy, right? And and you can create layers and nest them, any number of levels deep. So you can add, a child layer to a child layer to a child layer, right? You can have as many layers as you want. So just for fun, why don't we do a quick example? And what I'd like to do is, in the last video, I gave you some challenges to do this on your own. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve one of the challenges now, and I'm going to do this one. It's probably one of the easier ones. And you can see this is kind of a drawing. It looks computer generated, so it's kind of, we're going to make it with the computer, right? And we can imagine that we've got a view that contains all of these layers, and we're going to make one colored rectangle for every layer, right? Every rectangle here will be its own layer, and then we'll just add them up and nest them, right? And, why would you use layers? I mean, you could have one view inside of another view, but views come with a lot of overhead because they detect for touch events and they handle a lot of other stuff. So really, if you're making a complex drawing that is one thing, right, that one thing should be a view, and then all of the little drawing bits inside, all the parts of the drawing should really be on layers, right? Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to go to Xcode. And I've got a sample here where I solved some of the challenges there just to see how long it would take to do them. And let's make a new one, right? So what I did is I started by making a new Xcode project, and I made the single view application. And then, I went to my view controller here. I use the default view controller. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a function called make rectangles. Let me make the text a little bigger here. Right, so I'll make a function, I'll call it make rectangles, and I'll do all the work here to draw the views, right? And then up here, I'll call make rectangles, okay? So, so there we go, right? We'll call in view did load, we'll call make rectangles, and then down here, we'll make our rectangles. So actually, I'm not going to draw the rectangles here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a subclass of UI view to draw my rectangles, okay? So to make a new subclass, I'll do Command N to make a file. I'll choose Cocoa Touch class. I'll call it rectangle view. And I'll make sure the subclass is UI view. And then I'll save it to my project folder here, and then here's my new subclass. Now, by default, they give us this drawRect method, but we won't need that for this example. And I have a whole section where we'll talk about drawRect, and we'll use it for some stuff, but we won't need that right now. So what we're going to do first, though, is we're going to initialize our rectangle view with a frame. Init with frame is the default or designated initializer for our rectangle view, right? Or one of the initializers, right? And you pass in a frame, and then it makes the rectangle that size, right? Or it makes the UI view that size. So you can see here we're subclassing UI view, right? So the first thing that happens when I type in init with frame is I get this warning here that it's going to tell me that you're overriding the init with frame that's in UI view, so you need to include the override keyword here. So we'll do that. And then I've got another one here, and it's going to say that we need to include init with coder. Init with coder is used when we initialize a class from storyboard. So we'll be able to create views ourselves that we can just drag into storyboard like you do with the built-in widgets like the button and UI label and stuff like that. So we'll be able to create our own. This one won't be able to do that yet until we implement init with coder. Right now, the default implementation says fatal error, right? So, if we tried to implement this from storyboard, it would, storyboard would try to create an instance of the view, call init with coder, and then it would call fatal error and crash our program, right? So we'll just leave that there, and it'll give us a message. We could even put something in here, rectangle view, init with coder has not been implemented, so that'll tell us where this happened, right? Okay, so now what are we going to do? Let's go back to init with frame. So the first thing we need to do here is we need to call init with frame in our superclass and pass the frame to the superclass. So we have to say super init with frame and then take the frame here and pass it on. Okay, so now we're good. So now let's create some layers. So every view has a layer, and this UI view is no different, right? It has a layer property. So it's got one layer that we can draw on, and we could actually draw all the shapes into this layer with some other tools, CA or UI Bezier path or some of those tools, but we're going to do it with layers this time, right? So that's our whole thing, is we're going to look at CALayer right now and how that works. So this is our default layer, and we're allowed to add sublayers here. So you can see there's add sublayer, right? And we can add a CALayer to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some sublayers, size them to the correct size, and then give them background color, and then add them as a sublayer to our default layer, okay? So let's use a for loop here. We might as well do that, right? So let's say for I in 0 to, I think I have about 8 of those square or those rectangles, right? So I'll do count 0 to 8. And then what we'll do is we'll say, you know, let R for a rectangle equal, and what I want to do is I want to create a rectangle that's the size of the view, but inset by a certain number of pixels. So what we'll do is we'll say bounds, because that represents the internal coordinate space of this view, right? And then we'll call inset, and since we're going to add these as subviews to this view, right, we should be using the bounds to represent that space, right? So we'll say inset by, and then maybe we'll do 10 pixels. Maybe, yeah, let's just do 10 for now. We can always change the number later, right? Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll say let, let's just call it L for layer equal new CALayer. And then the CALayer, you'll notice it doesn't initialize with a frame. So we'll have to actually set the frame, okay? But we've got the frame here, right, and in R. So we'll do that. And then we'll say L.frame equals R. Right, so now the frame of this layer should be the same size as the frame for the view, but inset by 10 pixels all the way around the outside. Okay, so now we've got to add this as a subview to, or a sublayer of the current views layer. So we'll say layer. You know, and really this layer right here would really be like self.layer, right? Okay, because this is the layer that belongs to our UI view. And then we'll say dot, add sublayer. And then our sublayer is L, right? So now our last step is to create a color, right? So we can set the background color. I'll actually put this add sublayer last. And then we'll do L dot background color. So, layers in a lot of ways are very similar to views. They have a lot of the same properties. They're a little bit different. But essentially, like when you set the background color on the view secretly actually just passes that background color down to its layer and sets the background color here, right? Okay. So anyway, let's set the background color. So how are we going to do the background color? Well, our background colors, if we look at the example here, they kind of cycle from red to, through kind of a blue kind of color there. Maybe it's like the red and it's getting a little bit transparent as we go across it, right? So maybe mine will look a little bit, not quite the same colors, but it'll look close. So why don't we do this? Why don't we do, why don't we say, let's do this. Let's do, trying to think, what's a good way to set the color? Let's do it this way. Let's do UI color, parentheses, and I'm going to choose, where's the one I want here? Oh yeah, hue, yeah, this one, HSB, hue, saturation, and brightness, right? And so we'll put the hue here, and then we'll put our saturation of 1, a brightness of 1, and an alpha, right? So what do we do here? Maybe we'll do this. We'll say alpha of 1, and then we'll change the hue over time, right? So we've got 8 layers here. So we can say let hue equal, how about CG float. Now the hue needs to be a CG float, and the I up here is an int. So we'll convert it to a CG float, and then we'll multiply by some step. So our color will change over time, right? Let's do, I don't know, how about, now the number here for hue needs to be a range of 0 to 1. And imagine that 0 to 1 is going around the circle like the color wheel. So, so we don't want to change too much. Maybe we'll just do 0.1 and see how that works, and then we can experiment with the numbers. And then we'll plug hue in right here. Let me actually do this. What if I put these guys on their own line right there, and then we'd be able to read them a little easier. So we've got background color is UI color, hue, saturation, brightness, right? What am I missing here? Oh yeah, this needs to be a CG color. So we'll put .cg color on the end here. So we'll, this is our UI color, but then we need to, get the CG color from it. Okay, so let's give our code a test here. So the first thing we need to do is go back to view controller, and right here where it says make rectangles, what we'll do is we'll actually just make an instance of rectangle view, right? So what we'll do is we'll say let r equal rectangle view, and rectangle view has an initializer that's initialized with frame, and that's calling our init with frame that we set up in the rectangle view class. And so we need to put a frame in here. So we'll say, how about bounds? Oops, not that. We'll say a view.bounds, right? Wait, I did the wrong one again. Bounds, right? And then we'll do another inset by, right? So we'll make this one inset by 20 pixels. And then we'll take our new rectangle view, which I called R right here, and we'll say view.add. Did Xcode just crash it on me? I can't believe that. I was almost done. Okay, well, that was pretty good. It recovered pretty good. Totally frustrating though, but let's do, let's ignore that and then do, where were we? Okay, view.add subview R. Okay, so let's save that, and then we'll test it, right? Okay, wait a minute. So I'm pretty close there, but my rectangles are not quite working out right. So so let's do one more thing. So that's looking pretty good. I forgot. I just remembered one thing, right? So I got my views here, and I'm inset by 10 pixels from the original view, but I need to inset by 10 for each, for each rectangle, right? So let's do a little maneuver here. Let's move this outside here like that. Actually, why don't we put it back in there? I got a better idea. I actually need to come in by 10 for each iteration, right? So why don't we just multiply this? Why don't we actually make that a variable? Let's say var, inset equals CG float I times 10, and then we'll just put the inset amount here, right? Maybe that'll work. There we go. How about that? And then we'll save it and give it a test. I guess I could have made that a let. Oh, there we go. It looks like my color range 0.1 is too great, so I'm going through too many colors there, right? Let's make this, a smaller number. You can play with the numbers here. Why don't we make it 03? Okay, so anyway, so that's pretty good so far. Let's make that a let to get rid of that warning. Oh, now we're getting somewhere, right? So anyway, I'll leave that for you to finish up, and that hopefully maybe gives you a quick